This session is 5 lessons learned from operationalizing FinOps with Peter. My name is Vaz. I'm with the FinOps Foundation. I'm hosting the room. We're going to have Peter give his talk and some time at the end for Q&A. All right, Peter, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. We'll get started. Nice to meet everybody. My name is Peter Irwin. I'm a sales director at Spot by NetApp. We help customers optimize and operate their cloud environments at a optimal cost. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the lessons we've learned with our customers operating and operationalizing their FinOps practices. So I was tagged in to replace Matt Jordan, my illustrious peer from Cloud Checker, who's been helping a lot of customers with this. So might lean on my notes a little more than I normally would, so forgive me for that. But what we're here to talk about today is, while FinOps provides a framework for systems, best practices, and cultural alignment across disparate teams trying to operate and optimize their cloud, successful implementation is not necessarily guaranteed. So we've gathered insights from real-world organizations on what they've learned as they've moved from crawl to walk to run, hit some hurdles, and we'll share some of how these organizations have moved through both failures and successes to help implement cost visibility, optimization strategies, governance, and collaboration to align to their business outcomes. And really what it comes down to is operationalizing FinOps. Where I'm going to start today is how our customers have told us that they see FinOps in their organizations. So we've asked a lot of cloud ops people across FinOps, SecOps, DevOps, data ops. How do you see FinOps? Get a spectrum of answers. They fall into a few categories. One of them is, that's a team. Those guys handle it. I pitch stuff over to them, and they take it and optimize it and deal with it. And it's a problem that I don't have to worry about. Somebody else handles that. Some teams also see this as another set of rules to follow, another set of compliance, governance, financial controls, reports that I owe somebody at some point, right? Things to do, more tasks. Similarly, maybe another set of tickets or another queue to deal with, another laundry list that they have to clear down every week or day. And hopefully, increasingly, it's actually a shared responsibility, right? This is actually this is something that I have ownership of in my development process, in my building process. By show of hands, who here is in those first three categories? Maybe the latter? Who here is living in the future? All right, good for that guy. The point is, it can be seen as a burden, or it can be seen as an enabler, right? And something that ties development to business and ties technical operations to business outcomes. And we are seeing an increasing adoption of the latter here. One customer of ours says there needs to be a bridge between development and business, with a business finance person embedded within the development team. You need to have both a tech and a finance background, we hear a lot. We want FinOps to be involved in product development right from the beginning. You wouldn't go build a business around a physical product without understanding your cost of goods, would you? Or what it takes to manufacture and build your product. Is it worth it? Is the value in return, there for what we're doing? Developers are shipping code. That's product, right? So we need to understand how does that product work from the beginning and build your business justification and ROIs out of that. So what we really mean by operationalizing FinOps is not a one-off project. This is not a optimization event or point-in-time solution or even periodic business practice necessarily, but a embedded cost consciousness and cost management into your day-to-day activities and processes across your teams. This should not be reactive. It should be proactive and embedding across relevant people and teams everything about the cost and understanding of that business operation. It's not somebody in FinOps coming and looking over your shoulder saying, hey, turn that machine off, please, right? That's not going to get it done. It doesn't scale. A lot of our customers have thousands and thousands of developers around the globe supported by a few people, right, on the operations side, and you can't be one-to-one. So how do we get proactive? How do we use automation? How do we make it part of the culture? And another customer insight here, we look to provision resources cost effectively as part of the development process. So moving all the way upstream as far as you possibly can. So what are the four things we see as needed? So first is culture and mentality, right? This is everything from the language we use, the goals we set, and the interactions among our teams, how we treat each other and how we talk about these things, how we talk about cost. It needs to work for your company and culture. This is not a one-size-fits-all. There's not a mandate on culture around FinOps. It has to fit with your architecture, your business challenges, your goals, and it's constantly changing, right? Our customers say that education across the company is key to change the culture, and it has to be stressed from all levels, from leadership to developers and the owners of FinOps as an outcome. It goes without saying that visibility and transparency is an important part of this too. Stressed by all of our customers. It's difficult to align on process if you're not sure how you're being measured, or if there's not an agreement on how we're going to measure it. So the application teams need to understand the costs and burdens and the ways that we're going to track and allocate and manage those costs. I can tell you on the sales side, going through some acquisitions, having many disparate systems, the amount of arguing over just the facts can be astounding, right? What is the facts of this? And we're not even making progress on solving problems. We're just trying to agree on what is the facts of the ground truth. So visibility and getting on the same page and having views across the organization that are relevant for those stakeholders is critical, right? When we have data, we get minimal pushback from engineering, says one of our customers. And we use cost optimization as a carrot to give engineering teams more headcount and more resources with the money that they are able to save. Another key is making this part of the day-to-day processes and the rhythm of the business, right? When resources are provisioned and scaled, how do we deploy more applications? How do we make the processes conscious of the FinOps needs and principles? And how do we hold accountability across those development groups and stakeholders to make sure that they're able to operate efficiently and in a governed and consistent way? Consistency is key, right? So how do we support FinOps adoption? Well, the FinOps framework, Inform, Optimize, Operate, gives us a great way to look at this. And we see this sort of aligned to crawl, walk, run in some sense, right? First is getting on the same page. Again, are we arguing about facts here, or are we solving problems and looking at getting better on the facts? At the highest level, there's a lot of details here, but we need to inform, optimize, and operate to achieve that scale. One customer insight here is there's a need for a deep level of detail, a need to break out the cost by Scrum team, product feature, and create our own unit economics to figure out the cost per customer, fixed cost, variable cost for each product, and understand our pricing and margin decisions that we're going to make. FinOps impacts the whole business, right? It's not just the development teams or the finance teams, but it's where those things come together. Optimization is often looked at by folks we talk to as, again, a point in time. Attention was drawn towards our cloud costs because it got out of control and we needed to figure out how to fix it, and we fixed it, and the next day we felt really great about how we fixed it, and then a couple weeks later we watched the drift, right? And everything that everybody said that they were going to use for 3 years suddenly changed, and the forecast changed, and we bought a company, and we have to figure out how to support this new thing. And so optimization must be continuous, as is your development and integration, right? You can't optimize every 6 months, or you're unoptimal for 6 months every time you go. Spot has a tool platform that allows this to be really continuous using automation. And then we get to the day-to-day operations and how do we continue to operate this. And this is about getting on the front foot and being proactive rather than reactive. We need to take care of the things that are the fires and drills and automate them and find ways to make those processes scalable and handle themselves, and exception process handling and building those things. But you can only get to building those things if everything's not on fire. So how do we get out of reactive mode? How do we standardize on the 80-90% rule and move towards a proactive operations? And that's where we really help. So I'll talk a little bit about sort of the portfolio of Spot by NetApp and how we enable these things. And to no surprise, it starts with visibility. And how do we look at the single source of truth? How do we obtain that? There's a lot of work we've done with organizations to figure out that visibility is useful. It's another dashboard doesn't solve your problems necessarily, but having a common language to discuss the issues certainly does. And giving the right visibility to the teams that are meaningful to those teams will ease a lot of this gnashing of teeth and conversations, right, and the wringing of hands here. So how do we find ways to give the application teams the visibility they need, the finance teams the visibility they need, the DevOps, the assurances and understandings they need of their environment and the costs, to again, provide that single source of truth, communication, and consistency. Next, we move to optimization. Again, this is a lot of things fall into the bucket of optimization. Our portfolio helps you optimize how you buy, provision, manage, scale cloud compute resources. Whether you're managing commitments, RIs, savings plans, sustained use discounts, all of these different commitment options. I'm sure everybody in here is doing those things, but how do you do those optimally and all the time and in real time? That's where we help with automation and providing really economies of scale and leverage with our customer base. Governance is obviously a key part of that too, right? This is not just random engineers trying to do their best, but it's a framework in which we make visible and transparent the reporting and costs and visibility to what's going on. It's a key part that we help align the different groups across the organization to a common goal and thread. Finally is automation, right? And this spans all of this, and it's kind of a catchy buzzword, but it really helps our customers get off of the back foot and get out of reactive town and get into proactive business process building, innovation, focusing on uptime and reliability, focusing on critical projects that move the ball forward. That's another customer insight here. So all of our customers expressed success in their FinOps processes improvement, finding ways to save 20 to 30% of costs outside of our platform and what we do, just with the time they freed up from getting out of, again, firefighting and into forest ranging, so to speak. To wrap it up, I want to share just 5 lessons, 5 bullets that we've talked to customers about, what we understand from customers here. First is, it's got to work for your company, your culture. It's not one size fits all. Come on. You were right, it is a funny clicker. I'm going forwards. Let's see if it goes forwards. One more. Oh, there it is. It must work for your company and your culture, right? If you are a very heavy development shop, innovation, you're building new things, your revenue and top line are dependent on your ability to innovate and stay ahead of the market, you need to build your FinOps culture around the ability to support those highly paid, expensive, needle-moving resources, right? If you need to keep lights on, that's a different kind of thing, but there's going to be a spectrum of ways that your company needs to see business in your applications, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. There's a broad spectrum we see across our customer base on how they govern and manage and operate these things. But we do see a pretty consistent getting FinOps involved in development from the start. Again, you wouldn't go build widgets and sell them and build a business model and plan if you didn't know how much it costs you to build the widget, would you, right? So how do you incorporate that understanding of your financial situation from the beginning of the process, and that's how it gets baked into the culture as well. Finally, make sure there's 2 more after this. Make sure FinOps stakeholders provide a bridge between development and business. Having financial acumen in the development room, having a business voice in the application teams rounds this all out, brings it together, makes it a lot easier when they're on the same team rather than this team pointing at that team, right? So embedding that financial mind into the development process makes that easier. Having lots of data makes these conversations easier if that data is sound, right? There's not as much pushback from engineering when you show them facts that they agree with and can't dispute. It's easier to say, hey, this is what's going on. Handle it. What's that? Yeah, fair. It helps. If you don't have it, you're getting nowhere, right? So maybe table stakes, but certainly important nonetheless. And then finally, consistency and governance. You got to get standardized. You have to get out of reactive world. You can't be fighting fires on trivial things if you want to scale. And using automation is really the only way to get out of that in our view. And what our customers say and see, this really helps. So that's all I've got for today. Thank you guys for bearing with me and attending. I'm open to any questions and happy to share more.
Thanks, Peter. If you have questions, we'll take questions now, and just put your hand up so I can give you the mic.
You can shout it out if you're comfortable.
Oh, we're recording these. So
oh, sorry.
Thank you very much, obviously. And my question is more just around the automation, right? So there's like a lot of talk about continuous optimization. What are some of the the big hitting automation pieces that you've implemented, that you've seen implemented? Like challenges that you run into if you start optimizing people's box sizes down, stuff like that.
Yeah.
What are your big ones?
Yeah, the big ones are, well, I'll speak to the Spot portfolio, right? We automate really two big areas. One is how you manage your commitments, RIs and savings plans. Spot has a portfolio of customers, and we're able to do some interesting things with standard RIs and buying and selling, leveraging the secondary marketplace, proactively managing your conversions and convertibles, and just making sure you're maximizing your discount and coverage in a reactive way. We can sell and offload commitments should your usage change, should the business needs change. So automating that gets you out of a little bit of the back and forth capacity planning, and are you going to use these boxes for a year or 3 years? Can I commit to 3 years, or should I only buy 1 year? Savings plans can be an easy button, but you're candidly leaving money on the table, right? The standard RIs are deeper discounts. If you can figure out how to manage those, it's better bang for the buck, and that's where we help. We help automate that management of those commitments. Another place that we help is automating the scaling of more cloud-native applications. So containers, Kubernetes, auto-scaling groups. We scale using container-driven auto-scaling. So letting the pods themselves define what instances are spun up and down, and maximizing that allocation using all instance types. And then leveraging Spot instances wherever we can using our predictive algorithm. So putting that actually into production for lowering your cost without compromising your SLAs and your availability. We run Spot instances at very large production scale in many, many global web revenue generating applications, right? Ticketmaster is a great example of that, right? Those guys, their website is money. Every downtime is millions of dollars. And that all runs on Spot in production across the globe. So finding ways to automate scaling, automate how you buy and reserve instances is really where we come in and help.
Thanks, Peter. Any other questions, challenges? Oh, right here.
So when I see providing a bridge between development and business, that's typically going to be a product owner, in some cases solution architect. Is it enough for those roles to have some finance knowledge in your experience, or do you need somebody that's a more dedicated financial analyst or those sorts of skills to be successful?
I think if they have some financial knowledge, it's more about accountability and taking ownership of the financial outcomes of that application, and somebody having that in their wheelhouse, right? It's fine to know about finance, but if you don't care about the financial outcomes, you're going to do what you need to do to have your uptime, right? So it's more about having somebody on the team accountable to the budget and the finance.
Thanks, Peter. We have a question back here.
Thank you. So can you talk a little bit more about number two, right? So I think there's a difference between how you manage commercial cloud versus our R&D side of things, right? And I mean, we talk about sales, right? Sales outside, they will sell stuff that maybe doesn't exist yet, right? And our development teams need to be creative.
Never.
No, that never happens. They need to be creative to try to put a solution in place. How you manage that cost of that development cycle? Because I mean, sometimes the development even know what the final product will be. So what are the practices there?
I think that ties back into one, which is there's not really a one-size answer on that. It depends on what your goals are. If you're innovating and building futures to change the market, and how do you estimate ROI on a new product like this, right? It's very hard. You're putting some fingers in the wind. I think the point really is thinking about that from the beginning and how you're architecting the applications. Be conscious of what cost implications there are in your architectural decisions, right? Can we move these things? Are they stateless? Can I put them on Spot instances using something like Spot Ocean, right? Can I run these in containers, and what are the costs going to be if I run these in different instance sizes and types? And I mean, the list goes on and it gets deeper. I think it's more about knowing and having that data in the development process the whole way through. And as it develops more, we get a clearer picture, naturally. But that's my understanding of that.
So it's more about our architecture discussion and then really DevOps discussion, I guess?
Probably more DevOps and FinOps, yeah. And architecture, it's being in the room. It's having a financial person in the room, in the development room, when we're deciding what new stuff to build and what are the implications of that, and how am I going to get my report on my profitability of my COGS? Do they know how they're going to be measured? That's a big thing that we hear is, if I don't know how I'm going to be measured, I'm not going to care, right? So just setting expectations on, you're going to get your numbers back, and this is what they're going to be, and how you're going to see them, right?
Thank you.
We have another question over here.
So we're a little bit early in our FinOps journey, and poking again at number 2 here. We've kind of met some challenges, maybe a little bit of a chicken and egg thing on the ROI and trying to assess that. And from one angle, it being, hey, we don't need to try and do a cost analysis on every single thing we do. We only want to focus on the big things and, look at ROIs there. But then, the chicken and the egg being, well, we don't really know if it's a big expenditure if we don't do a cost analysis and take a look at that. So I don't know how you might address that challenge. So not trying to overburden teams as we're getting them to adopt the FinOps mindset, but at the same time worried about, making decisions with, maybe our eyes closed relative to cost.
Yeah. I don't have an answer for you on that, except it's good you're in the room and you're having these discussions early on, right? At least they're open to it. It's tricky. This is the balance. It's you can't stifle development and creativity and progress and innovation, but you also can't go running wild with an AWS credit card, right? So it's going to have to fit in your culture and what you guys are trying to do, and what your tolerance for that risk of the unknown bill coming back ultimately is from the executive level, right?
I would just add too, you're in a really great place to talk with your peers here and ask that question and see how folks have tackled that as well. So I got another question over here.
So overall, the question is around shifting left and accountability, right? So I don't see that called out here, but how do you see in the, with other companies as far as their budgeting process? I understand show back and charge back, yes, but where does the budget really sit for cloud spend? Is it with the individual product teams, or is it centrally managed somewhere else?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've seen it in both places, either in product teams themselves. I think that's probably the dream, the ideal state. But many organizations have that cloud center of excellence and holds the whole budget. I know a lot of cloud center of excellence are trying actively to divest that ownership into those product lines and business units, and that's a process, right? That's the goal tends to be is budget goes to the product, but it depends on how your architecture is. If you've lifted some legacy thing into the cloud versus you're really, adopting containers and Kubernetes, and what tool sets you have to go charge back and show back those things. Our tool sets help with some of that, but it's a big question, right? It's more than simple buy a tool and solve your problems. So
We got one more question over here.
So in the automation, and we were talking about reservation in Spot Lake, how do you put together with this the right sizing so we don't have wasted over provisioning? So how do we manage all the 3 practices together?
Yeah, good question. So I think from a Spot perspective, what we do with right sizing is more around, there's 2 vectors. There's allocation and capacity, especially within containers, or allocation and utilization within a container environment. I'll talk about just in that use case. We automate the selection of the instances so that we're maximizing allocation. Developer requests this, we find the most efficient way to give those resources to the application. Utilization is, okay, well now it's running, how much are we taking, right? Are we using everything we asked for, yes or no? That's a trickier thing. You're going to have to handle that I haven't found a tool or heard of a tool that really solves that because of sort of the nature of applications. You need to understand if, hey, it needs to boot up, it needs this many resources, even if it's going to use 1 vCPU all day long, you might need to give it 10 because of something, right? It starts with getting visibility and then having those conversations. So we can look into those pods and see what the utilization of those are versus what was requested, and then you have a conversation. There's some ability to automate. You can do these things in dev QA, sort of right size and shrink down and see where you give yourself heartburn and problems ultimately. But I don't think there's a silver bullet on right sizing that I've found or heard of yet. Does that help? Does that answer your question? Maybe, maybe not. It doesn't really, because there's not an answer, maybe. I don't know.
We got another question over here.
So doing a follow-up on number 2 there, cost, efficiency, and ROI. So we could debate, how granular should we get on costing smaller things, but there's the benefit side of the equation to get that ROI. And it's one thing to have a benefit statement when you're planning it. We're going to make 10 million, we're going to save 5 million. I'm interested to know about approaches to get, and to your point when you were speaking earlier, numbers that we agree on, and benefit is always a really challenging one. So it does seem to be one of the linchpins of our decision making and the ability to tie it back and say, you got what you paid for, we did what we said we were going to do. I'm sure this is like going to take a lot of different answers, but I'm just curious, in the field, what you've seen to get numbers everybody trusts,
On the benefit side, I mean, that's a big, broad question, right? Because that's like, why are we building this app? So I don't know. I actually haven't heard that part of the conversation as much. I live in the world of costs primarily, but that's an interesting problem. I don't know. Does anybody else here have anything to share about that? I open up to the floor on that one, candidly. I mean, you're talking about market sizing and market analysis and product adoption and feature utilization, and that's all very dependent on your business and your product, which again kind of ties back to one. You got to figure out what you're trying to do, and then just understanding the cost side of it as best as possible, and then holding accountability to those benefits if you do end up deriving those or not, right? And then reanalyze your cost model. Did we, the ROI wasn't as much as expected. Are our COGS what we were expecting? Can we manage that at the scale we ended up with?
Thanks.
Thanks. Any other questions for Peter? All right, Peter, thank you very much. Appreciate the talk.
Thank you, guys.
JR here from the FinOps Foundation. Thank you for watching. Please go to FinOps.org if you want to get plugged into this amazing community. And of course, hit subscribe right here on YouTube to get all the future content. Hope to see you soon.